Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, we are officially starting our 2023 December ranking series. As you can see, there is going to be a schedule in which order the videos are going to come out. We're going to start with 2023 champions ranked. Then we're going to rank all the classes and their relative strength. Then we're going to go to each class top 10s. And then we're going to do overall top 20 and then some specific battlegrounds videos. And in the finish line, we're going to be taking a look at the tier list update. Before I go any further, though, I have been told that I need to read the following statement and warning disclaimer. So, warning. Watching this video will inevitably cause irrational fits of anger, unspeakable desire to prove your opinion, unexplainable levels of aggression over video game characters' perception in the community. Therefore, please do proceed with caution. Now that I am no longer liable for anything that is going to happen in the comment section, because I do kind of expect a little civil war to take place there. Right. Obviously, this is a mixture of my opinions, current game relevance and trends. We all play the game differently at different levels. We care about different game modes to different extent. And we have different preferences and playstyles and so on and so forth. Therefore, we do not see this game exactly in the same way. These lists are never an exact science. We do not have concrete data to look at from Kabam, like, champion winning percentages, how frequently these champions are used, how many of these champions are ranked up, so on and so forth. Therefore, we are left on our own devices to kind of form our own opinions. So keep that in mind. No champion here, has the perfect way to view it. But let's just get right into it. And from the very start, it is evident that 2023 has been an amazing year of champion releases. Honestly, this video is probably going to be titled unfairly because I'm going to title it The Worst Champions of 2023. And in reality, there are only like 2 champions I properly want to harp at. I think the rest, the other 20 champions, have a place, have a purpose, are at the very least relatively solid additions to the game. And such is life, however. Unlike what current school system teaches our kids, not everybody is a winner. For one person to win, somebody else typically will have to lose, and you can't put every champion up top. And realistically, when you start placing these champions, that's the biggest thing that I want you guys to understand. If you put a champion up top, somebody else has to come down, and then you need to figure out which champion you think is less than. And this will be my best attempt at it. And ultimately, I think the bottom 2 champions will not be a surprise. We're going to start off with officially the biggest disappointment of the year. It's Gladiator. He is not a single thing that he was advertised, perceived, or expected to be. As simple as that. Obviously, he's not complete trash champion by 2016 standards. However, it is kind of ironic that, Hyperion is miles better. And Hyperion was made like 7 years ago. And that's the problem with Gladiator. Number one, community was harsher on Gladiator than perhaps they otherwise would have if he wasn't community choice champion. As a community choice champion, that comes with certain expectations, he's a complete and abysmal failure. Now, obviously, he's still up for balance update, so perhaps that will change in the future. However, currently, he has arrived in a contest like a little trickle of pre-ejaculate cum, as in it just fell on the floor, nobody noticed, nobody cared. And that's what he is. He's a meme of the year, basically. And he isn't even that bad of a champion, because as I mentioned, virtually every champion released in this year kind of can do something. The problem with Gladiator is not only the community sentiment towards him, but the absolute pointlessness of the character, because anything and everything he does, he has to work relatively hard for at the beginning of the fight, at the very least. And there's just no real payoff. Like, all of his max ramp up equals like 2 Fury buffs from Hyperion. So you need to, drop 15 heavy attacks to get the same benefit that Hyperion on average will get with a single heavy attack. And on top of it all, you need to rely on the most unreliable debuff in the game, which is Intimidate, which basically never works. And that Intimidate has a ridiculously short duration. Therefore, you have to kind of like maniacally try to dash at opponent, hoping that they will put on block, which they often don't. And what do you get for all of it? Nothing. Like, that's the biggest problem. Not only he's a ramp-up character, which are kind of like quite tricky to pull off in today's game, because today's game is primarily focused on short to medium level fights, be that battlegrounds, be that Alliance War, be that, casual questing. Nobody really does these super mega long fights daily. And if you're designing a ramp-up character, that's already kind of like making life harder for yourself. And if you're designing a ramp-up character that doesn't amount to much, that's just a recipe for failure immediately. And that's what he is. Like, there's no other way to look at it. Gladiator, at the moment, currently in the game, is an utter and disgusting failure as far as the community is concerned, because nothing he does is special. There's, no reason to invest rank-up resources in him. His ramp-up damage potential is shit, objectively speaking. And his levels of utility are mediocre at best. So you're probably better off, investing in a mediocre champion from 4 years ago like Jubilee than you are in Gladiator. And that says a lot. That's a very harsh critique, and I think it's accurate. He serves no purpose in game as of right now. He hasn't proved or showcased his worth in any area of the game, not even in Realm of Legends killing Winter Soldier. And that's who he is. He's like, and failure of a smurf. There we go. That's Gladiator. Now, moving on towards, and this is honestly a hard placement in between these two champions, because Dani's utterly shite as well. And the problem with Dani is she just doesn't work. Nothing that's meant to be good or work around her kit is worthwhile. There are like 3 people who are Dani Moonstar enthusiasts, and I'm sure that they are all going to find their way to my comment section. But she's just garbage. She ultimately needs a complete kit redesign. The only reason I put her above Gladiator is the fact that if you do try hard Dani Moonstar things, and if you do have the right relic, and if you do, really, really, really practice the character and have like an incredible level of skill, then you can actually get some decent results out of her when everything goes right. That is like, if you are like a world-class player and everything goes right in the fight, she will do some cool things, unlike Gladiator, because there's just no way for Gladiator ever to do anything cool. Like, Gladiator would need some incredible help from the nodes, like Cold Snap vulnerability, Incinerate vulnerability, and some other crap like that, for him to pose any respectable fight times or do interesting fights. Dani Moonstar at least can put up big numbers, can feel satisfying. The problem is that 9 times out of 10, you will only be able to achieve that fighting against like a Drax or King Groot or Gamora with no nodes, provided if AI cooperates with you. And people often ask me, why am I so harsh to Dani? And this is going to be a very quick and true story. Dani is the worst champion I have ever made a guide for. I had the hardest time actually getting a decent, smooth Dani fight in, even in a duel setting, even in matchups where she should be working. I remember trying to record like a perfectly smooth Korg fight for like 35-40 minutes, and still settling for a fight where I ended up getting clipped just because it was impossible in between timing everything, in between hoping that AI dashes in at you and that your vulnerabilities and overload debuffs don't expire. It's just that awful. It really is for the most part, unless you are, again, super hardcore Dani player. And the problem is, there's no real point in being one. Like, you don't gain much by learning how to play Dani to perfection, because she can also be absolutely trash in the matchups that she's meant to be good for. For instance, one of the coolest things, or one of the big things that was advertised about Dani, is how she has that marked passive that shuts off the immortalities and, indestructible effects and stuff like that when opponents about to get KO'd. And some of the most, relevant matchups that she would be able to benefit from that is, for instance, Hercules. The problem using Dani against Hercules is you better pray to God Hercules never randomly throws a level 1, because if he does, he gains true focus buff and he can bypass your phasing, and if you can't phase, obviously you're going to get smacked in the face and you can't ramp. Therefore, when using Danny against Hercules, you need to always consistently push him to level 2. Only way to safely do that in many cases will be taking some block damage and slowing the game down, which will likely mean that your level 1, level 2 rotation isn't going to have enough time because your overload debuff from level 1 is going to fall off. And then, not to mention the fact that the Infuriate also screws with a lot of her abilities. And the end result is that you're just much better off using any random champion against Hercules than you are Danny. Even though this is kind of like one of the cool things. Oh, she, bypasses Hercules' immortality. Similar thing to when your Danny's Awakened. She was advertised as like the new perfect Nick counter. I remember the people talking is like, Nick Fury is going to be shit for Battlegrounds now. She's going to destroy Nick Fury. It's going to be pointless to add Nick Fury to your deck and stuff like that. And guess what? I have seen more people fail Danny Moonstar fight against Nick than actually succeed. And the problem with that is that in order for you to bypass Nick's second life, you need to have your neural arrows, neural shocks active. And then, obviously pending your SIG level, if you have at least one, when he would purify them, they get immediately reapplied, right? She only applies those neural shock arrows at end of her special attacks. So if you're going to fight Nick Fury and you're actually using your level 1 or level 2 to kill Nick Fury, and if one of those hits, let's say, crit, and he dies before the last hit connects, he enters his second life. And those neural shock arrow durations aren't that long. And you have to use your special attack to apply them. And again, the level 2 is the big damage special attack, right? So you drop level 2, if it crits in plenty of cases, Nick could die before that. And that's, again, not even accounting for the fact that Nick can throw a level 1, and if he throws a level 1, again, he can bypass miss, and if he bypasses miss, then you're kind of screwed. And that's Danny. Effectively, nothing about her kit works properly. Like, if she's getting a balance update, and I pray to God it's like a massive one that's more closer to a rework, because she genuinely needs every single one of her values reworked. Like, for instance, neural shocks need to be like triple or quadruple the length, even if they do less damage, just so they are there. After you activate special attack and effectively stay there the entire fight, doing little damage, let's say. Her overload debuff, energy vulnerability, debuff, 30 seconds. It seems like a very long time, but with Danny, it really isn't all that long, because once you activate that, you need to, again, fully re-ramp her to get like the proper level 2 damage payoff. And that, in most cases, is much harder to do. Not to mention the fact that that slow passive, that's 20 seconds, that's an awesome to have thing, but again, 20 seconds is not enough for you to do a full rotation and maintain that slow passive in most cases, which will mean that in a lot of fights where you need that slow passive to be active for the majority of the time, you will exclusively have throw level 1s, therefore forego most of your damage. And, I can say basically similar things about every single ability Danny has. They need like double or triple the duration for her to be viable in, meaningful settings. And last bit, all of this thing, even when fixed, she would still be a champion that relies on her level 2 critting without having some sort of guaranteed crit or even a particularly high crit chance. Right? Yes, of course, Gambit Rally can help with that, but it's not a guarantee anyways. And yeah, you can have a perfect fight and you can do the level 1, level 2 rotation. And if your level 2 doesn't crit, it feels like you have done very, very little, or what was the point? So, Danny is definitely also in the garbage tier of the year. Alright, so let's move on to the next champion. And next champion kind of pains me to put him there, and that's Sandman. And Sandman's already in a significantly higher value in my eyes, because Sandman does have a place in games. Sandman can do some things. And, an officer of mine, White Bummy, has rank 5 and ascended his Sandman and is using him for Alliance War. And at the moment, for instance, in Alliance War, he's an absolute menace, right? And there will be places and areas in the game where Sandman will do well. He's arguably the most potent heal reverse champion we have at the moment, with those petrifies on level 1 and, access to a ton of debuffs, that's the spare and everything else. And there are some very, very cool things about Sandman. It genuinely kind of pains me to put him as low because he's exactly the type of champion I like. He has a lot of immunities. He has plenty of utility. His buff did some good things for him, actually opening up a level 2 rotation, being like somewhat viable of a damage rotation. But still, at the moment, it doesn't seem like it has been enough. And that's one of those things that, we need to accept with champion buffs. If a champion gets released extremely underwhelming, and then they get just doing quite alright, for most people the ship has sailed already. And it kind of feels similar to Sandman. I like the guy. I think he has value in questing. I think he has value in Alliance War. I don't think he's a good Battlegrounds champion at all, unfortunately. But the problem with him is, why would you? It's well, when all the alternatives are so much better, or do things better and faster, and can do more game modes, why would you? And it's kind of a shame. It's a shame that they tuned down his buff. I think if they didn't, there could have been way more buzz about him. It's possibly a shame that they didn't go even further with Sandman, because there is a lot of good stuff in his kit. It truly, truly is. Even with the reduction of your heavy ramp speed on his buff, I think if they still made his level 1 kind of more viable to be a part of his damage rotation, that would have helped him tremendously. Because at the moment, if you do want to access your heavy burst of damage, you kind of have to do the level 2s or 3s. Because with level 1s, the debuffs just don't stay long enough if you're throwing heavy attacks. With level 1, you can stack the debuffs only if you're doing 5-hit combos and going immediately into special attacks and being hyper aggressive and then getting your petrifies up. You cannot do a level 1 rotation and do the whole heavy attack knockdown opponent getting rooted thing, which is the primary source of his damage in most cases. So I feel like that's also taking away a very big part of his actual utility, to a point where he needs to switch in between whether you're going to be doing damage or whether you're going to be trying to heal reverse. And that's kind of a major weakness, considering we have plenty of champions who do both at the same time. And I think that is kind of the final thing. So yeah, I'm going to put Sandman as the third worst champion, regardless of how much I like the character. It's kind of hard to explain. I really, really do like the way he's built. He's just objectively not that great. Moving on, Shocker. Now, Shocker initially was number 3, but I think I have a legitimate explanation to why I'm placing Shocker at spot 19, as in the 4th worst champion of the year, and that's because he's just getting buffed. If, Shocker didn't receive a balance update, or if it has been in the game already, and he was effectively the same, I would have placed him slower. But the thing with Shocker is, there's still hope for him yet, because his balance update does ultimately promise more damage for him, and that in theory should make him better, because that's the way he's built. If he would be faster than he is right now, he would have immediately gotten significantly more popular. Now, not to mention the fact that Shocker's introduction in the game was one of the most disingenuous things Kabam has ever done, because in all of Kabam's promotional material, in the deep dives and the shorts that they made for Shocker getting released, he had significantly higher damage output because he was bugged, right? So when we got Shocker in the game, he actually had about 30 to 40% less damage on his heavy attack, which immediately meant it just wasn't enough. And he was effectively built for Battlegrounds, as it was explained for the most part, with this one big burst of damage. And when he entered the game, he just couldn't burst down the opponents with that one big burst, because they reduced his damage and effectively made him, a one-trick pony, but that pony had 2 broken legs and needed a wheelchair. That was Shocker. he was built effectively and advertised for like one thing. He's going to be cool for battlegrounds. You see, spam the level 1, level 2 heavy attack champions die. If he had the power level of his deep dive, maybe things could have been better. The power level that he has right now, I don't think so, Jack. So he's up for a buff. I'm actually going to be recording pre and post buff videos later today for Shocker, and we're going to see what changes, how big of a difference it is. And ultimately, perhaps, we are going to be able to see more of him. Other than that, I would put him below Sandman at the moment, because Sandman, at the very least, has like Alliance Warriors to fall back on. But let's hold on hope for Shocker. Again, if the buff sucks, I would swap them into place. All right, let's move on to the 5th worst champion of the year, and that's Kindred. And this is another one really, really sad story, because Kindred's awesome. This kit is cool. Like, reducing the buff duration, love that. Using degen, love that. Has immunities, love that. Incinerate, poison, heal block, infuriate, intimidate, effect, immunity. Awesome, right? His power control, special spammy playstyle. Or there was everything to make him like cool and viable offensively as well. Not to mention he's obviously built as a defender. Here's the problem with Kindred. It took players exactly 2.5 weeks to kind of figure out how to fight him, and now he's kind of like whatever. Like, generally, he's not awful on defense, he's, whatever. You need to know one thing when fighting Kindred. Okay, 2 things. How to punish his level 1, which is dash in the middle of his special, parry or evade it, and then immediately punish it, which isn't that hard to do. It's really not, some sort of mental gymnastic thing to do. And then you just need to kind of have a bar of power when he reaches 5% of his health to get rid of root. That's it. And people learn that very quickly to a point where right now he's not really all that big of a threat. And I'm sure there are going to be people saying, "Oh, Kindred's doing great for me on defense," or "Kindred's been awesome," stuff like that. Like, realistically though, put Kindred next to, I don't know, Maestro upon his release, or Photon even still now. Those are much, much, much tougher on defense than this guy is, for sure. And then there's the flip side on the coin. If Kabam is going to make a defender, exclusively defender, it'd bloody be a nightmare fuel. He might look like one, but again, he's just not scary on defense anymore. It took like a month. And given also the fact how jacked Science Class is, just not good enough on defense to be so drastically defensively tuned character. Like, Kindred is a definition of 90% defense, 10% offense, right? And a great example here is like Maestro being released right now, and Kindred's kind of like marked a good counter for Maestro. And he is, but he's so slow, it takes still like 90 plus seconds to do that, right? And yeah, that's kind of like the biggest shame, because he actually has everything in his kit to be also decent, solid offensive champion. Like, Mojo, for example. Mojo and Kindred has quite a lot of similarities, and you can make an argument that Kindred is maybe slightly harder than Mojo in defense. Not by much, anyways. He's definitely significantly more shit on attack. And that's Kindred. And the tragic part there is that they completely butchered the boy on attack, even though they clearly took care of his offensive kit as well, because there's plenty of value and interesting bits of utilities there. And then they refused to balance him. Like, what the fuck? This was such a huge oversight, and the guy has dropped off drastically. He really has. He's not like awful, but he's a shadow of what he could have been. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to a bit different story. A story of indifference. And that's Mund Dragon. Mund Dragon smells of a champion that almost was. She's definitely better than a lot of people think she is. She can do some cool things. She can put on a ton of debuffs, therefore, synergize with Despair and Inequity. She has some cool bits of utility, shutting down Evade in most of the fights. If AI is cooperative, you can maintain her psionic transcendence been going for a very, very long time. She's immune to reverse controls, which is quite rare, and people don't even, bring that up as a potential Grandmaster counter, nameless Grandmaster counter in Abyss, because nobody really pays attention to Mund Dragon. And, there are some cool bits in her kit, without a doubt. The problem is, it's just not quite good enough. It's just under the level of being noticeable or buzzworthy. It's kind of like OG Black Panther in the sense of that type of level champion. She can do some very, very, very cool things, and if you enjoy the champion, you can definitely rank her up, and you're gonna do well with her. But when it comes to grabbing the attention of community, she just comes short. And what I blame for it is potentially, the fact that she's not necessarily the easiest to understand or to play. She seemed to have been like slowed down or tuned down. For instance, the potency of incoming bleed, power sting, and degeneration and poison effects from champions or quest buffs reduce the potency, for instance, of all poisons and bleeds and power stings and stuff like that by 30%. But it says from quest buffs. Why? Why not champion abilities also? Like, why not masteries also? Like, if she regened a bit with recall masteries, would that be such a crime? I don't think so. She's not breaking the game in any capacity. Again, she just seems like just not quite enough. Definitely better than people think. I think, if everybody got a free 7-star Mund Dragon right now in the game, we would see a ton of gameplay from her, and, she would do well. But when you have realistic choices to make, if you have your skill catalysts, whether you're going to give them to Valkyrie or Mund Dragon, you're going to go with Valkyrie. You're going to give them to Kingpin or Mund Dragon, you can go with Kingpin, and so on and so on and so forth. And that's just where she landed. She's good. She's always going to be one of those champions. I'd like to rank her, but I'm going to rank that champion because I think that's going to be more important and beneficial. And that's where I stand on Mund Dragon. Right, spot number 16, Shield. Her position could change because she's very, very new to the game. I personally just very recently acquired. But I'll be honest, she's one of the most boring champions to play to begin with. And that alone will hamper her popularity in the game. But on top of it all, she just doesn't seem that great. And she doesn't seem like awful. She has like virtually all of the marquee skill abilities. She cleanses and purifies, and she can like bypass, misses, and she has like that grit passive that basically lets her ignore unstoppable, and she has tranquilize, and she has access to bleed. And if you can't bleed, then you can get the precisions or cruelties or whatever. And she just, again, doesn't quite... What's the best way to explain? It could change again. It's very, very early on. In case of Shield, I definitely don't want to be overly judgmental because brand new champion, might see the best of her yet. I don't, however, hold my breath necessarily on that based on what I have seen, what my experience has been. And here's going to be yet again one more of those arguments where the game is fast-paced whether we like it or not. If you are honest with yourself, outside of Necropolis just coming out, how many long fights do you do a day, a week, a month? The answer is, in most of the months, we don't ever do long fights. Let's say a million health pool plus. How many of those fights we do in an average month? None. Maybe incursions, but it hardly counts because we get like supercharged buffs and stuff. And if you have a champion that's kind of slow to ramp up and is good for longer fights, they're just not going to work if they're not also good in short fights. Because again, for all intents and purposes, this game has hierarchy of game modes that ultimately attracts the most attention and the people get most engaged with, the people rank up champions for. And it's clear that at the moment, Valorant is the king of the game modes. And then Alliance War is kind of dedicated hardcore players, but nowhere near as popular. AQ is more popular, but people don't really care for AQ and are not really willing to invest many resources for Alliance Quest. Kabam has made solo player content kind of whatever, and again, it's not a piece of content that you will typically rank up champions for, with the only exception for Everest content, like Necropolis, where people will rank up that Aegon and then forget about him for 6 months. So ultimately, for champion to be ranked highly, to be successful, to be great, first and foremost, there is the Battlegrounds in the Alliance where that's up top. Because, questing, you're going to get through questing. Questing has become significantly easier than it has ever been. And there are far more counters to whatever we need to tackle with. And you can just pick whatever you have for those questing problems to begin with. Like, if you rank up a champion for Battlegrounds, they're going to be good for questing anyways. And Shield, again, I just don't think she's going to be anywhere up there. She seems to be a bit too slow. There are some very, very good things in her kit, but will it be enough? I don't think so. You might have a different opinion, but I'm not overly optimistic. We'll see. Moving on, Vox. And Vox is another one of those champions where some people really like him, some people don't. And I'll be honest, I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Vox. But at the same time, I do want to acknowledge the fact that he's at the very least currently already putting in some work. People have been bringing him in as a legitimate Necropolis option because he can do, very solid amounts of damage in the long fights. He's also kind of a ramp-up champion, but unlike previous champs that we mentioned, he actually, has a very solid baseline damage that you get very, very quickly and early on, and that allows him to be viable in Battlegrounds. I have been hearing good things about him in Battlegrounds as well. I've seen some people use him here and there in Alliance War. He's far from a dominant Cosmic. He has not received the reception of Hulkling or Galen and stuff like that. At the same time, he's far from a meme or a mock champion or a champion that majority of the community openly kind of trashes like Gladiator. So I feel this is a fairly fitting spot for him. I actually have a rank 3 7-star Vox gameplay showcase coming up for you guys, where I, alongside you, will try to understand the character better. I actually personally don't have Vox in any meaningful rarity myself, so I have hardly played the champion, so I had to actually speak with quite a few people on this in my streams, in my DMs, and we kind of came to conclusion that this is a fairly respectable place for the champion as of right now. Obviously, these positions will slide and will move because, the champion's value in game always depends on what the game demands and what the game values itself. And, that is decided by new pieces of content, by Alliance War, by Battlegrounds metas, so on and so forth, by new champion releases. And, there is a very decent possibility that Vox could be, climbing up the ladder. Let's move on. And spot number 14 is Baron Zemo. Now, it's no secret I hate the champion. I think he's one of the most overhyped champions in history of this game. There's absolutely no secret. I have memed, trashed, and talked so much shit about Zemo. It was very hard not to place him lower just because of how awful that I'm kidding. Okay, anyways. Here's the deal. Zemo is not great. He just isn't. He's not as bad as I might have implied he is in some of my live streams. Fair enough. But again, he's not particularly great either. He's okayish defender. But the only thing that makes him okayish defender is the fact that our AI is currently screwed. That's it. He's like very weird medium animation, and sometimes he gets stuck not throwing level 1. That's pretty much the only thing that can make him a decent defender. Other than that, offensively, he's gosh darn close to garbage tier in short medium content. He really is. My personal breaking point was when we had the perfect Baron Zemo meta. It was that Sharp Claws, where you get 5 bleeds placed on you when you parry, aggression regeneration, and something. And I rank 4 Baron Zemo for that meta specifically, when rank 4s were still perfectly viable, rank up level for top tier Balagons. And he was still absolutely shit in it. That was the perfect meta for Baron Zemo, because let me explain. As soon as you parried, you rooted your opponent. When opponent is rooted, you can immediately start stacking bleeds. Together with Despair Mastery and Inequity Mastery, you completely shut down opponent's healing, therefore you shut down Aggression Regeneration node, and you also have Inequity going for you, reducing the rest of the damage that you take. And then, you finish the route, you're almost on the way to the level 2, because you have increased combat power rate, and opponent had decreased combat power rate, and you can pretty much immediately throw your level 2 and go for more bleeds, more damage, and then, before long you can parry again, purify all of the bleeds, and root them again. And it was perfect meta. Still shit. He was still like slower than an average champion. I spent exactly a day and a half in my deck and like 6 attempts with using him offensively, and he was just outpaced every time. So, even in the perfect conditions, he sucks for Balagons. Let's just establish that. He can do some things in Alliance War now and then, but the only reason you're realistically bringing in Baron Zemo on attack in Alliance Wars is if you're a massive fan of Baron Zemo. There will be better options for virtually everything he does. And, Necropolis definitely kind of boosted his stock up a little bit, hence his placement higher than previously. And yeah, okay, fine, he can kind of be annoying on defense sometimes, a little bit. He's definitely not the red mask savior that people proclaim him to be. And this is the best I can do. Take it or leave it. Baron Zemo, Spot 14 of 2023. That's the best he's ever gonna get. Also, ironically, the last thing to mention, I think it's kind of funny how much Kabam screwed him over in the balance update, and then with the change to root. And then at the same time, Kabam's kind of pushing him, because they gave, everybody in community free Baron Zemo with cyber deals. Cyber deals are kind of like themed around Baron Zemo and stuff like that. So I'm getting some mixed signals. I get a feeling that somebody in Kabam really, really loves Baron Zemo, and somebody in Kabam secretly hates Baron Zemo. And there's some sort of internal struggle going on. Whatever. By the way, Zemogate was real. Anyways, let's move on. Spot number 13. It's Werewolf by Night. And Werewolf by Night, without a doubt, is the most fucked over champion ever released by Kabam. Let me explain. Werewolf by Night is a lot better than most of the people think. The reason why Werewolf by Night came out, and again, like a little trickle of pre-ejaculate, fell on the floor and nobody noticed that he has joined the game, is because of the current metas. Werewolf by Night was the tactic defender. Problem is that all of the tactic defenders get absolutely destroyed by decay attackers. To a point where, in competitive battlegrounds, for instance, people just stop running Mythic Champions just because all of the Science class was completely running over them in the previous meta. And in this meta, there's quite similar phenomenon, because, again, Science Champions are getting kind of championed by Kabam, where, I'm personally not running a rank 2 Mangog, I'm not running a rank 5 Ranger, just because everybody's running Silks Titanius and the rest of the Science Champions that get, all of these Fury boosts and benefits. And all of the Science Champions just get nuked, because, again, all the metas kind of favor, not only with these specific nodes that supercharge the Science Champions, but also with the additional nodes. And since Werewolf by Night has been released, there hasn't been a single moment in time when he wouldn't be bullied by the nodes in the game once. Because, again, Alliance War 2 seasons that he's been in the game for, Sugar Pill and Decay. Balgrand's 2 seasons that he's been in the game for, we have this new Science Fury node, right? Where he's and previous season we had Sugar Pill and Decay. Alternatively, though, in whichever meta I have seen the guy, he's good. He's much better on attack than people realize he is, and he's also a very solid defender. I do think once this settles down, Once more people get him as like a 7-star, we'll see much more of him. There is a guy on YouTube, I forgot his channel name. I think it was Nox the General. Could be wrong. I'm gonna try to upload some rank 3 Werewolf banana gameplay as well on my channel. I'm probably gonna ask him. But I know for a fact there's a guy on YouTube playing with rank 3 Werewolf and doing some insane stuff. You guys should definitely check it out. He's much better than 95% of you think. Believe you me on that. And okay, let's move on to spot number 11. That's Weird Vision. Come on, you stupid Diablo cult remnants. I swear to God, Weird Vision has the most toxic fan club since Diablo. If you tell, I like Weird Vision, I just don't think she's that great, that's considered a treason. You're being called an infidel, and all of a sudden there are eggs flying at your windows, fucking 3 miles away from wherever the God knows they are sniping at me. Weird Vision fan club is awful. I mean, fanatic. I mean, seriously, Diablo levels of obsessed. And if you don't confirm and call her, you know, your Lord and Savior, then yeah, fucked. So anything I say in here about Weird Vision, you know, I already can smell 15 little goblins in comments section. Okay, fine. Weird Vision's buff wasn't awful, okay? Pre-buff, she was kind of okay. Post-buff, she is better. And now I'm going to say something controversial. Weird Vision will never be mainstream popular tech champion. And the reason for it is it's stupid level 2 tapping. You see, in order to learn that, you need to practice. People at large, community at large, will not do that unless she's at top of the tippy top. People did that for Quake, begrudgingly. And Quake, without a doubt, was the biggest mistake Obama ever did. The most broken champion ever created in this game has been Quake. Because she just bypasses the game. She doesn't play the game. You just enter with Quake and you win. Just by doing the same thing, you don't have to adjust to the fights, you don't have to do anything differently, and it doesn't matter what opponent can do because they do nothing to Quake. Anyways. And Quake never won like a popularity poll. Even at the height of Quake powers, I don't think I have seen a single voter poll where community voted Quake to be the best champion in the game. Just because she's either, you know, a bit harder or a bit more tedious to play. And that same thing happens like always. Yeah, the most dedicated players might pick up a champion, but unless, you know, it's kind of consistently reinforced by everyone. You know, it was a wonder that even as many people picked up Quake as they did, because, okay, how different was she to play? Similar with Ghost. Like, we still have players, you know, who played competitively through the Ghost Mania and never learned how to play Ghost. And so on and so forth. And for Weird Vision to kind of like take that step from okay champion to be good to a good champion, you need to learn the timing of consistently tapping on the screen, and obviously know her rotations, and she's not the simplest champion to play, and kind of like Ghost, she's quite punishing when you do make mistakes. And that will ultimately, you know, prevent her from being like wildly popular. It doesn't mean she's not a good champion, because she is. She does have quite a few things going on for her. But that's just it. You can get a champion with similar levels of quality, if not better. That's easier and less risky. So yeah, anybody who loves Weird Vision, I'm sure you do for a reason. I'm sure you're going to be able to do great things. But at the same time, you can pick up plenty of other champions, do just as well, if not better, without having to expend, you know, effort or having to take, you know, as much risk. And that's kind of where Weird Vision's at. Her buff was kind of decent. I would have liked it to be taken in a different direction. But then again, to be fair, I'm not a huge fan of her level 2 design and ramp up. Or at the very least, the necessity to hit the consecutive hits in order to increase your damage. But whatever. At the same time, she's kind of cool. Like, okay, before you guys completely pull out the torches, yes, Weird Vision is kind of cool. She is enjoyable to play, can do cool things. Truce? Okay, fine. All that said, this has been quite a while. This has been a 45-minute video. Start off. Geez, this bodes well for the rest of them. But this has been the 11 worst champions of 2023. Right? So here they are listed. Spot number 12 is Vision, 13 Werewolf by Night, 14 Baron Zemo, 15 is Vox, 16 is Shield, 17 is Mund Dragon, 18 is Kindred, 19 is Shocker, 20 is Sandman, 21 Danny, 22 Glady Asshole. And I will be back tomorrow with part 2 of this, where we're going to take a look at 11 best champions released this year. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm going to catch you guys later. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information